Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, May the 24th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. And I'm happy because a lot of really nice things are happening in life. I mean, we got gorgeous weather. I'm going to get out for my favorite thing to do, my bike ride today. We've had gorgeous weather the last few days. The book is coming out. That's exciting. I mean, there's just so many good things happening. And Joel, when I first connected with you this morning, I asked how things are going. You said, well, it's pretty much the same as yesterday. I said, yeah, isn't that cool? And you said, yeah, it's the way it's supposed to be.
Well, and you know, we have the rare opportunity of speaking twice this week, which I love.
Right.
And,
oh, yeah, me too.
And, you know, and so a lot of people say, well, you know, how's it going today? Well, it's just like yesterday. And oh, that's sort of a negative view. But no, not when you're viewing yesterday is awesome too. You know,
that's right.
It's just really good stuff is starting to happen, and it's been happening, and it's been an evolution. And the fact our collaborative book has come out, and we're actually launching this weekend the ebook for
That's
sure.
Right. Yeah.
And so I mean that's in some ways that's a cumulative effect over how that came to pass. When we first talked several years ago, the very first time, it would be almost hard to imagine us having a book like that being published. So,
oh yeah,
it's amazing how this has all come to pass.
It's interesting too. You mentioned that first interview we did roughly 5 years ago, where it was actually the 12th episode of the podcast that I'd ever done, and there was something about that conversation we had that day where the energy was really, really good. It's one of the things that motivated me, you know, years later when I needed a new co-host to contact you, and I was very pleased when you came on board. But that energy, I as you're mentioning it, I'm realizing that energy was for us, for the book, for the podcast, and our interaction and so forth. That was a seminal event because that energy set the stage, and we continued it.
I agree.
Right to this day, you know, and I think that's pretty cool. We can actually look back at a particular point in time where the energy was good, and we can kind of see how the path worked out on that one.
And I almost guarantee you that, and I don't know how to predict where this is going, but I almost guarantee you that in 6 months or a year or you know whatever time frame you want to look, we'll be shocked at what happens next and say, wow, remember when we were talking about just the book coming out? Now look where we're at now.
Yeah.
And that's the progression, and that's such a metaphor to where we're going. Of this is it, you know, the idea that you these things happen, and it's so easy to look at life through a rearview mirror and go, you know, I see that point. But so every day when something, you don't know how something today has the potential to be life altering. We did that interview all those years ago.
That's right.
It did. You know, other than me taking an hour of a work day to talk with you, I didn't know it would lead to all of this.
No, I didn't either. I mean, how can you know that? There's no way to know that.
Yeah.
That's part of the point of living life and doing it with as much gusto as you can, just to find out how it's going to turn out, just to see how the play is going to resolve itself, you know?
Sure.
Now, we also have the book coming out, like you mentioned, and the link for those who are interested in the free ebook, and I suspect a lot of people are, for those who are interested in the link to the free ebook, that will be posted tomorrow morning, Friday morning, May 25th. As early as I get up, that's how early it's going to be posted, and it will appear on the homepage at loatoday.net. From that point through the end of day on Monday, and end of day, by the way, beginning and ending is actually measured in Pacific time. Even though, Joel, you and I are on the East Coast, it's on West Coast time because that's where Amazon's main office is, and so their servers are based on West Coast time. So the special offer will run actually through Tuesday morning, 3 a.m. Eastern time, but that on the West Coast, that's officially midnight at the end of the day on Monday. So we'll have 4 days where people can use that link to get a free copy of the ebook. And then we actually want to take the time here and the opportunity to announce officially, Wendy and I unofficially announced it yesterday, but officially Tuesday is going to be the launch date of the paperback version of the book. The paperback actually, I mean, they are the same book. There's really no difference in the content. But from an Amazon perspective and from a book selling perspective and from, rankings on what the best sellers are and so forth, they actually track them separately. So we're going to do 2 separate launches. And if you're planning to buy the paperback, we ask that you hold off. Don't buy the paperback over the weekend. Don't buy it now. Don't buy it over the weekend. Make your purchase on Tuesday, because that's going to give us that combined oomph that all the purchases made at the same time provide, and help give us a nice, good push up into the rankings. So please give us a help with that. And we'd love you for the fact that you're going to be buying the book.
Yeah, and it's an incredible, it's sort of collaborative effect of stories of the law of attraction and successful use of the concept, and from different coaches' points of view, where while we all believe in the same thing, we all sort of come from different backgrounds and have small, differences in how we see. So it's a nice contrast to see who uses what, and just from the amazing effect this can have. And so I really feel that this type of thing is something that is growing. People are more buying into this concept more and more. And the more examples you can put out there, the easier it is to see how this works, instead of making it some crazy magical thought process that, is somehow voodoo in some people's mind. It's just a real simple way of thinking to bring more stuff into your life.
Yeah, it really is, and it works very nicely. And the thing I was focusing on this morning, Joel, I was doing my mirror exercises this morning. And in the mirror exercise, I basically am looking at myself in the mirror. And you may remember when I first started doing this, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it very long, like 5 seconds. That was the most I could look into my own eyes. But now I can actually do it for minutes at a time, which is nice. It's a nice change. But that mirror exercise, I basically was giving myself a pep talk and saying, we just have to get the energy level up. When we get the energy level up and we stay in that high energy level and stay in that high energy feeling, and all the authors are in that same feeling, man, this book's just going to take off. Because that's what we're all putting out there, And I kept pushing and pushing that. Yeah. And the funny thing is, you and I both know this, as the more that you focus on a thought, the stronger the belief in that thought becomes. A belief is a thought that you think over and over again. So that's what I was working on, and I could feel it building up inside me. It was fun. I was actually enjoying it. 2.5 months ago, I would have been embarrassed looking in the mirror at my own self, saying all these things to myself that were, so positive. And now I'm feeling so good about it. It's a nice transition. It feels so good now.
That's great. And you have that way of thinking, or that way of feeling, more than anything. When you get a group of people, one of the things I love about the Napoleon Hill and his belief process that he spoke about in Think and Grow Rich, and I've used to success many times, is the concept of a mastermind process, where you get a group of people. It could be 3 people, it could be 50 people, that are start collaborating together using the concepts of law of attraction, the amazing things that come from that. And in a sense, this is like a mastermind process that we've done. And, that if we're all looking in the mirror, so to speak, and we're all thinking that same direction, that there isn't any way this can't be a best-selling book. It just really can't help but be that.
That's true.
And it will touch other people, and it has that potential to really, the difference between, I was looking the other day, there's something like 12 million books available on Amazon, or something crazy number.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And the a lot of them are now, the way you can publish, a lot of people have just written stories or and they're real basic. There's books on there that have never been remotely advertised. People never even mentioned. There's people that have written books and just have them up that have never sold a copy, or sold 1 or 2 maybe. And I'm sure there's some really good stories or really good books that have never been discovered. And when you look at it, like, here's what's happening, getting this out there, the difference between a best-selling book and one that hasn't been discovered yet isn't always the quality of work, as much as it is the sort of the luck of, or the attention, who gets the attention. Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, talks about he loved the concept. And by the way, our book is very similar. It's law of attraction based, but you have a bunch of different stories in that. And I think that's a really big point. But he talks about when they did this, it was, they completed the book, and nothing happened. And they were determined to get out there. They kept going, and they kept, making appearances, and they kept promoting in every way they could keep it. They kept pushing and pushing and pushing. They really believed in the book. And it probably took a year and a half, and then the right person got hold of it. And then it just took off crazy.
Yeah.
And so that's it wasn't like, his process was, everybody said, "Oh, you got lucky with that book." And he laughed. He goes, "Well, if luck means, do it, working your butt off to get it." They're like, "Yes, we did get lucky." But, it's such an amazing process that the law of attraction brings us to just push in the same direction, believe. And, one of the things we wanted to talk about this morning is our topic, the inner dialogue. What you tell yourself is in a sense your reality, and it creates by working on your self-worth, what you believe in yourself is such a powerful tool. But so the topic itself is your self-talk determines your self-worth. That's the name of the topic for today.
Right.
But we're going to try to break down why that works. And and yesterday we mentioned, it isn't just about, let's have a positive thought. "Oh, I want $1 million," and you get $1 million the next day. That's not how it works. It's the same thing with the self-talk. The point of self-talk, or the mirror work that you were talking about earlier, where you really start reinforcing yourself to yourself, it isn't really the self-talk that matters as much as it is you're programming the subconscious. That is one way to program the subconscious to believe your self-worth, and then you move forward. Then you move forward with believing what you believe you are. And the idea that if you're confident and you really, I really just enjoy seeing people who are there's a fine line sometimes between character or what have you, and cockiness and confidence. And it's good to have confidence, but when you're cocky, it sort of goes to the other side. And I'm listening to I'm always listening to books. I try to listen to a book a week, and my goal is to go through 52 books in a year, and I'm actually ahead of that pace.
Are you really?
But there's a guy named yes, I love doing that. There's a guy named Eric Barker, and he's wrote a book called "Barking Up the Wrong Tree," and it's where I'm at today. And he's discussing this gentleman that practiced. He was a master of martial arts, and he was able to focus his energy and knock people out without touching them, is what he was selling.
Yeah, I've seen that, but that's wild.
And he has it. All of his students, they would run toward him. There's videos. He would just put his hands up but not touching them, and they would fall over. And it was this. He really strongly believes that he was able to focus his chi, so to speak, and direct that energy and knock people out. Well, another martial artist, an MMA specialist, decided to challenge him and said, "I don't believe you." Well, he was highly insulted because he knocks people out without touching them, and he said, "Okay, challenge him." Well, the MMA defeated him in less than, I think, 8 seconds or something. He just punched the dude in the face and then got him in a submission hold. It was not even close. The chi power did not work. Now, the entire time, it turns out that the guy was so confident in his ability that he really believed he was knocking people out or knocking them down with his energy. But more importantly, he had sold the people that were being knocked down or knocked out that they were being knocked down. They weren't playing they really believed it. And so within that, his confidence did. But when he got to a point of an irrational confidence, like, okay, here's a 210-pound man who's a professional MMA fighter, and he doesn't believe it. There wasn't a rational thought process. So, the self-worth and that inner dialogue that we have with ourselves, you walk a line that you want to be confident, and then you get to the cocky, and then you get to the over. Like a lot of CEOs have so much power, and they're very confident. They lose touch with the reality, and they really believe they are better than. And so as I develop this concept of what I'm doing, I want my self-worth to be how I'm confident at what I do. I believe in what I do. I'm good at what I do. However, I need to walk that line of I am not better than anyone else, nor am I less than anyone else. We are all on that same level, maybe different points in the path. And that's a very important part of this self-talk. It isn't just about pumping yourself up saying, I'm great. I'm the best. No, I'm great. I'm great at being me, but there's a difference between that and I'm just simply great. Does that make sense?
Oh, I agree. Totally. In fact, if I try when I'm doing my mirror exercises to simply say I'm great, which I don't do, by the way, but if I tried to do that, I know without even trying it, it wouldn't work for me. It wouldn't feel right. Because the whole point of the mirror exercise is to help me feel better. And just saying I'm great doesn't make me feel better. Whereas saying I love myself, I'm proud of myself, I feel good about what I'm doing, that makes me feel better. Yes. But if I would just said I'm great, it'd be so disconnected from any emotion that it wouldn't do anything.
Well, and that's the point. We touched yesterday about the placebo effect and the belief of something working. A strong self-belief, is so important. But again, it's like everything else in life is there's a balance. The idea that, I want to be rich. I want to be rich mentality that attracts so many people to the concepts of law of attraction. Actually, they get frustrated because it doesn't work the way they think it's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
When every day of your life is focused on, I just simply want to be rich, the resistance is, I am not rich and I don't have that ability. It's an unattainable thing for me. And so you look at it from a different lens and you're actually having a reverse effect.
Right.
The concept of living in, I don't look at myself as rich or I have an abundance. I have all I need. I'm in a wonderful financial shape. I love my life. I get to do that's how I look at it. I'm not worried about money. And when I'm not worried about that, I have plenty of money. I don't need to get into I'm rich or better than, or I've worked very hard to get where I'm at. I'm very pleased with where I'm at. But at the same time, I live in an abundance and I have everything I need, pretty much everything I want. And that is a healthy place for me to live in. It's not that I'm, I'm rich. It's because I'm great or rich. That's not how I view it. I view it as I have an abundance. And I live with a mindset of abundance. But when you're desperate for money, when you're viewing it and you come into the law of attraction to attract money, you don't realize the resistance you're placing with doing that. And that's where that inner dialogue becomes such an important factor. It's not just the inner dialogue or the self-talk determining your self-worth. That's the main topic here. But it's what are you really telling yourself in that self-talk that matters?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely true. In fact, that's also one of the motivations behind the book. I mean, when I first conceived of the idea of collecting all of these manifestation stories, these stories of how people experienced and even leveraged the use of the law of attraction in their lives to produce some amazing results, I figured that would have a number of effects. First and foremost, it would be fun. It would be entertaining to hear and read the stories, right? And to see what it was that people had managed to bring into their lives by changing their set point, by changing their focus and perspective to a more positive perspective. I also knew that if we can put a book out like that and when it takes hold of the popular mental awareness, so to speak, and more people start to read it and to take advantage of it, it was going to provide, I believed, a very positive influence to encourage people to feel better about themselves and to encourage people to feel like they can let go of certain resistances, even if they don't know that they're holding them, whether it's about money or anything else. It doesn't matter what the resistance is about. What matters is
absolutely
noticing it and releasing it. So as that idea took hold in me and I started spreading it with, like you said, with life coaches predominantly, because that's who most of the authors are, I got great reaction. People were saying, oh, what a wonderful idea that is, because they, as life coaches, also recognized the great power in not only shifting our perspective, but feeling good about ourselves. And if you can feel good about yourself by reading about the exploits of others, then great. You do it with a book a week, more than a book a week. I still don't know how you do that, but you do it with a book a week. That's really cool. You read and hear about 52 or more different perspectives every year just by doing your book a week thing. That's great. You're picking up the best of the best.
And it helps. And again, I always like to have truth and honesty when I share. I listen. I belong to Audible.com, so I listen. When I'm in my car, I'm listening to books. When I get up in the morning, I don't turn on a TV. I start playing my book. In my free time, I listen to my book.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
that's a good way to do it.
And when like today in my work day, I'll have probably a 45-minute break around noon, and I will put on my headset at work while I'm eating some lunch and not fall asleep, but almost listen to the book in a meditative state and really absorb that. So I really enjoy, and all my books are basically the same thing. I don't listen to any fiction. I listen to the majority of the stuff, like the 5-Second Rule. The book is a really great book about taking action. A lot of Think and Grow Rich kind of mentality. You're the placebo. All those books are the law, some form or fashion of law of attraction, maybe on the fringe of it sometimes. Self-help books maybe is a better term. But I gather a lot of hearing everybody's perspective, and it's sort of this book that I'm talking about right now. The gentleman that wrote this incredible concept that it isn't, it's sort of about rethinking. Like he talks about different people in different roles, and today the part of the book that he was talking about is that he was a lady that feels no pain, and she is immune to pain, and there's very few people that have that, but she literally feels no pain. Well, that's a great thing, most people would think, but she's very limited in what she can do because she damages herself all the time, and so her life is very confined because she doesn't know when she hurts. She doesn't. So while not feeling pain may be perceived as a greatness on some level, it's also a very dangerous way to live. Most people that have this gene or this, I don't know if it's a gene, but have this condition where they don't feel pain, is they die. Their life expectancy is half of what a normal human is, because pain is, while it's viewed as such a negative, it is a very effective tool to say, wait a minute, you need to stop that. And so that, again, learning to listen to other points of view and listen to everything out there and adjusting your self-worth by programming the stuff. Again, I always talk about, I'm as bad as a vegan almost, talking about not listening to the news. You know how a vegan will always say, "Yeah, the first thing to do, hi, I'm a vegan." It's the same thing with me but I don't listen to the news, and so I have taken control of my own programming. I program myself by listening to the books I listen to and surrounding myself with the people I do, and working on my self-talk. If I find myself doubting myself, or I find anxiety, if I find myself feeling anxious, identifying the emotion that I'm feeling and trying to understand where that is coming from. Occasionally I'll have sort of this minor anxiety, almost unidentifiable. What are you anxious about? I will take a moment, use my self-talk to remind myself that I'm in a great place in life. I will never allow that anxious or anxiety feeling to take over, even if I were to, sometimes it's just unidentifiable. I mean, you don't know why. And sometimes I don't know why. Other times I can say, oh yes, this happened. I can see where that's affecting me. I need to work on that. But self-talk is our really probably the strongest tool we have available in the implementation of the law of attraction. The actual, people want to know how to use it. The self-talk piece is the process of reprogramming the subconscious and adjusting the emotions in the way that's attracting what we want versus rejecting or resisting what we want.
Yeah, right. And one of the things that has amazed me, and I know I've returned to this theme repeatedly over the years, I continue to be amazed at the ability of the human animal to not be aware of the nature of his own self-talk. Have you? I'm sure you've noticed that as a therapist, but we just,
Oh, sure.
I mean, people just say stuff, and they're saying stuff that's usually negative, and they don't know that it's negative. I know I did that. I had to be pointed out to me that I was talking negatively. My wife did it, a little over 10 years ago. She pointed it out to me, and she did it very nicely, but she did. And my first reaction was, no, I don't. I don't do that.
Yeah.
I really didn't. I wasn't aware of it. I just didn't know it.
Right. And that piece is so prevalent, just what you're saying. I mean, it's such a prevalent way of thinking. We all have this, like you're saying, this self-talk, inner dialogue, all that stuff that happens. And we don't realize that from a young age, from a young concept of us, we put ourselves in this position, unfortunately, where we don't realize, because we were programmed to anticipate the worst, to scan the horizon for what can go wrong. Somehow, I see that with parents all the time with their kids, unintentionally helping program the kids to look for the fear, look for the negative, look for what's going to go wrong, versus, let's change that way of thinking. And one of the things that, if I had a magic wand, probably about sixth or seventh grade, when kids are able to sort of comprehend this, seems to me, I would add a class about this, the value of self-talk. There is no better mental health tool, period, than learning positive self-talk. I believe that almost, and this is a stretch because there is some biological real reasons why people have mental illness, but for the majority of mental illness, I think it begins with negative or destructive self-talk. And most of the time they have no clue it's negative or self-destructive.
We should probably in complete being a complete presenter of the concept. We should actually give an example. What are we talking about when we say negative self-talk? What is it? How do we know that a self-talk is negative?
Okay, well, if a lot of times you don't even recognize it because it's an inner voice talking to you. Okay, here's an example of a beginning process of negative self-talk. I'm applying for a job today. I'm not qualified. God, I mean, I have a criminal record. I have, my last job I left, and you start coming up internally with all the things that are going to easily be objected to. And then you then sit down and you interview with the person, and you subconsciously are having this negative self-talk, and it becomes self-fulfilling. You don't realize it's affecting your energy. The energy that the other person, when you sit down to interview with somebody, your words are important, clearly. But more importantly, in my mind, is the idea that you are letting them feel your energy. And when you sit down with somebody and your energy is high, it overcomes so much more than is on your resume. And the opposite is, when your energy is low, it defeats no matter what's on your resume. And so when you find yourself, sitting there, it doesn't necessarily, when you're looking at objections of why something won't work or why you're not successful, or, one of the most uncomfortable things to do is, whatever your most uncomfortable thing to do is almost always the thing that you should do the most. The idea of, like if the simplest thing to do. If somebody's looking for a job right now, and I don't like the word networking because it sounds so formal, but getting out and mingling. If you want something in a field, a certain field, there's always groups of people in that field somewhere. Go start attending the meetings. Go start attending whatever support groups or whatever, and mingle and meet people. And I always use the concept too that the job, like a job is advertised in the newspaper. Any job that makes it to advertising in the newspaper, in my mind, means that nobody working at that company knew anybody that wanted that job. So, because that's how jobs are fulfilled within. Do you know anybody that would want this job? I can't find anybody that wants this job, so I got to go advertise to the outside world. So the inside track on jobs is important. See, that self-dialogue of, I need to get out there. I need to go meet people. I need to shake hands. Well, most people, that horrifies most people. That concept, public speaking, for example, horrifies most people. But Toastmasters is a wonderful organization which helps people who have trouble speaking, and also is a great place to network. So whatever your objection is, when you start your inner dialogue, being able to confront that is very important. I've walked into situations before. I don't interview for jobs anymore, but back when I would interview for jobs, especially after I had my criminal conviction, I would, okay, that's the first thing they're going to find out, or they're going to, when they ask that question, I'm torn. Do I tell the truth and then they just dismiss me, or do I actually lie? And then when they see what a good job I've done, then they're going to, what are they going to do? So I had that dilemma a lot of times. And I learned to turn that into, you heard me say, I've turned that into a credential now. When I'm telling my story and telling what I want to do, I did consulting work for this firm in South Carolina that had a treatment center for really sexually aggressive boys. And it was a horribly run facility that was about to be shut down. And they asked me to come in and see if I could consult with them, or at least maybe even become a temporary director to turn things around. So one of the first things I said, before we begin, I said, I want to get something out of the way. So for those that do not know my entire story, I was convicted of a crime due to my addiction 15 years ago. I want to get that on the table. So and then I began to tell them, ask questions, and tell them what I want to do. By the end of the interview, or the process that we were going through, they offered me the job. I turned them down, but they offered me the job, and they said that actually makes you more qualified for working with these kids, that you could relate to them more. I turned a negative into a positive, and that inner dialogue for so long defeated me and did not allow me to put that out in front. And most of us have that going on. So working on that inner dialogue, programming it in a way that is fitting the situation, and identifying, as we were looking at, identifying when it goes negative, and that becomes a skill unto itself. You develop that, because there's almost the concept that there's positive thought, there's neutral thought, and there's negative thought. A lot of people, including me, operate that neutral is basically negative.
It is.
It's and so really 2 out of the 3 are not working in our favor. Whereas adjusting things to positive are absolutely the key to doing this. But this takes a skill set, like you're saying. You didn't even know you were thinking negatively for so long,
right?
But or speaking negatively internally, and until you break it down. But what are you thinking right now? The reason that most people are listening to this show or this podcast is they're wanting to change something in their life. That they want to attract something. They like the concept. They relate to the concept. But how do I implement it? And that is the understanding. What are you thinking? At the end of the day, the emotions that you feel when you think, it causes the attraction. That's the catalyst for the law of attraction.
And I want to address two things there. I want to address 2 points there before you move on. Because, first of all, you managed to answer a question before I could even raise it. I thought that was pretty cool, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But the other was, you mentioned the idea of positive, neutral, and negative, and that neutral is actually negative. And there's an example that I think of whenever somebody gets confused about that I find really helps illustrate it. And that is how a legislature works. When a legislature, the easiest one to think of is the U.S. Senate, because there are 100 people, so it's a nice round number. In the U.S. Senate, if you have 49 people who vote yes and 49 people who vote no and 2 people who abstain or don't vote, the motion is defeated because it didn't get 50% plus 1. It has to have 51 votes in favor in order for the bill to pass. So really, the abstention votes or the no votes are counting as if they were no votes. They're being counted as no's. And when you look at it that way, now it starts to make more sense. Well, how can something neutral be a no? Well, actually, it isn't a yes, and that's what makes it a no. There's really only two things.
Right.
There's only yes or no. Neutral is kind of our nice way. It's our politically correct way of saying, well, I'm negative, but I'm not really all that negative.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is the question that you answered before I even asked it. I love this. The question I was going to ask you is, well, how about somebody who says, yeah, but I'm just being realistic? And you answered it beautifully, but I want to bring it up in order. So I'm just being realistic when I say I'm not qualified. I'm just being realistic when I say that I really can't get this job. I really don't have the ability to get this job. I'm being realistic.
Right. Well, and it's here's sort of the conundrum of that way of thinking. I'm just being realistic. Well, it's your realistic thought that's creating the inability. That's the problem. Period. And that's the hard thing to grasp when people are looking at it that way. You know, it's that here I am. I'm living in this incredible world where so much is going on. However, I'm not qualified to do this, and that's picked up on. I mean, it really is. People pick up on that, and that drives them. So when you really believe it, when you really say, well, I'm just anytime I hear somebody just being realistic, that is that point that most people get defeated. Well, realistically, I can't do this. So then why are you applying for the job in the first place? What are you doing at that point? You need to apply the jobs that you only realistically believe you can do. But the truth is, what you really believe you can do is, I have a great example of this, Walt. There's a gentleman, and I don't recommend this because it's certainly not a normal way to do things. But he was a student of neuroscience. I mean, he is brilliant, and he really believed in a lot of the stem cell research, and there's a pharmaceutical company, Biogen. And it's one of the companies like Biogen. It wasn't actually Biogen, but it was advertising for a sales rep for one of its brain drugs, and it was a really high, it wasn't your typical pharmaceutical. They wanted somebody with a doctorate in neuroscience and all this other stuff. Well, this guy is the leader in his field. But he doesn't have a doctorate. He doesn't have a master's degree. He just is. He's a bit autistic on some level, and I mean that in a very positive way, right. And just knows everything there is to know about the brain. So he sits down with them, and he interviews, and he basically, I guess there's no other way to put it. He lies about his doctorate, but they're so impressed with him that they hire him, and. Then about 3 months later into the process, of course, when they're demanding the due diligence, he gets the email, so we're unable to verify your credentials. Can you please provide them for us? And right. He finally said, I don't want to drag you along anymore. I did lie, but I needed to get to see what I can do. Well, they actually had a big meeting, and he knew more than anybody about this topic. He was the best person for the job. They let him keep the job.
Wow.
And he really believed he was qualified, and he was. And again, I'm not recommending that you go lie about your credentials. I'm just using an example of somebody that really believed in what he did and backed it up. So that, he ended up with this $200,000 a year job with basically a high school diploma.
That's pretty cool.
And that's pretty good in that sense. And so within all of this, believing makes the sense. Believing is what drives us. And it's that realistic, quote unquote, point of view that is a grounding negative effect that appears to be neutral.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, as you were saying that, even leading up to when you were saying that, a thought occurred to me that I am sure never occurs to someone who says, well, I'm just being realistic. And that is, we never use that phrase about something good, do we? We never say, it's a beautiful day, but I'm just being realistic. It's ludicrous to even think that, Well, I just won the lottery, but I'm just being realistic. We never think of it that way.
Well, Well, it's funny you said I have this. I finally told him last night. One of our friends that my son Justin does Taekwondo. Great guy that runs it, and there's a gentleman there that his son is also there, and he has this habit of saying not to be offensive. And then he makes a statement. I pointed out to him yesterday that every single time you say that, whatever follows is offensive. You don't make it inoffensive by disclaimer that it not to be offensive. Exactly. It's offensive.
Exactly.
And it's that same thing, Walt. Well, I'm just being realistic. No, you're determining why it won't work. The idea that I remember listening to a recording of Bill Gates, and before Microsoft even had their first legitimate product, and he was talking to sort of a concept person about what he envisioned, and he was talking about one day everyone will have a computer in their home, and they'll all be connected, and we'll talk, and people will be able to conduct business on the computer, and people are laughing at him. There was no reason to believe that was possible. And then he goes further and he says, I'll take it even further. One day, everybody will have a computer that's handheld and will be 100 times more powerful than anything we already have.
Well, that's not realistic.
That's not realistic.
That's right.
That's crazy. You're talking Star Trek,
Yeah, that's right.
Well, in fact, you watched the 1968 version of Star Trek, and our cell phones are far superior than their communicators, which we thought were outrageous back then.
Yeah.
And we're way past that. And so he saw that vision. So if Bill Gates would have bought into the fact that it's not realistic, then we wouldn't have all of this. And that's everything that takes place. And I'm so, I get so excited when people understand. I understand first of all, I understand we have to pay our bills, Walt. We have to go to work. We have to do this. So I'm not saying there's not a place of being realistic, but when you've used that as a defeating mechanism of why something won't work, well, that won't work. Well, when somebody else goes out and does it, you're going to feel really bad. I'm sure we all have ideas that somebody at some point made millions of dollars off of. It's like, you at least have the general concept. Every day that every time I ever take an Uber, I'm going, how did I not think of this? Oh my gosh, it's so simple. It's such an easy concept.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I want to smooth some feathers over too, because there are probably going to be some listeners out there saying it wasn't Bill Gates who invented the smartphone; it was Steve Jobs. And yes, it was Steve Jobs. We're using Bill Gates kind of metaphorically, but you're right. It was actually Steve Jobs, but yeah, okay.
Steve Jobs invented it, but actually Bill Gates mentioned it years before Steve Jobs invented it.
Right. Yes.
He mentioned the concept of a handheld computer. And Bill and Steve Jobs made it happen.
That's right.
And again, you're right. Especially the Apple versus the other side. That debate's always big. But staying away from the concepts of what is realistic and finding that balance, because that inner dialogue is unfortunately has become a way of talking ourselves out of doing things, or talking ourselves out of being confident, or talking ourselves out of. It's almost like, well, let me protect myself by quote unquote being realistic, or somehow I'm going to protect myself by looking at the negative or what could go wrong.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how we do that? We didn't even think about it, but boy, do we do that regularly.
Yes. Yes. Let me. Somehow there's this idea that, well, if I mentally prepare for, I hear this all the time from people. I think about what's the worst thing that can happen, and then when it happens, I'm not shocked.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, okay.
That's what it is, isn't it? It's a way of like putting a buffer in. Oh, okay, it finally happened. Well, that wasn't so bad. I guess I can tolerate another one. Bring me another one.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of those things that that I don't. Again, it gets handed down. One of the factors that when I'm working with parents, and a lot of times parents are telling their kids, well, I don't want them to be disappointed. I want them to be realistic in their goals. And I'm going, oh my goodness, I want them to be unrealistic in their goals. I want them to think way beyond. Yes, I do know they need to learn how to add, 4 plus 4. I do understand that. I do, and they do need knowledge on how. But I want them to think differently, think without limit. There is nothing out there that is not obtainable. If you can envision it, it's there. That's the exciting thing about our life. I wake up every day and feel like, I really believe this. I think we live in the greatest time in the history of our world. I have access to every bit of information that's ever existed on the planet. I find that exciting.
Sure.
I can access that by getting my Steve Jobs / Bill Gates phone to just bring it up to me right away. I have all of it, and I love that. To me, that's such an exciting thing to have. Okay, so with that being said, I live in a world where I wake up believing that this is the perfect time to be alive. And yet there's people that wake up every day going, it's the end of times. It's worse. Things are bad. They're falling apart. It's just read the news, watch the news. It's just things are really bad right now.
Isn't it interesting, too, that when people say that things are falling apart, they never actually fall apart. You ever notice that? The things don't actually fall apart. It's amazing. The world keeps spinning. The seasons keep coming. The sun comes up in the morning and it sets at night. It doesn't stop. The earth hasn't been like devoid of life because of some environmental change. The world of religion hasn't completely died because some particular policy wasn't followed. I mean, it's not falling apart. It somehow continues to hold together.
Well, it's evolving, and it makes people uncomfortable. The evolution of things make people uncomfortable, and because it's different, it's not what they're used to. And so, the idea that whether it's I'm not going to talk any religious stuff or offend anyone with that. But, the concepts, well, my religion's under attack or this is under attack. Well, if your religion is strong enough and nobody can attack it. It's like when people say the law of attraction doesn't work, Joel, you're not thinking rationally. What you're talking about is harmful to some people. I go, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I factually know the law of attraction works because it's worked for me and it continues to work for me, period. It's actually a fact for me. And I don't need to debate that gravity works for me. Gravity works for everybody. I think law of attraction works for everybody. Whether you believe it works or not is totally up to you. I can't force you to believe it.
We want to try.
You do, because it's, this is us sharing stuff. And even within the spectrum of the law of attraction, we get up to certain places with, in my study of metaphysics, as I'm working on my doctorate right now in metaphysics, there are some things on the line of metaphysics that I'm like, okay, that's just one step over the line there. It's a lot of metaphysics include alien abduction concepts and all the other stuff, and I'm like, okay, let's not get too wacky with this. Well, it's like, okay, well, Joel, you're wacky on your stuff, but anybody, and I realize that it's like the old analogy that. There's two sets of drivers out there when you're driving on the road. There's, somebody who passes you is driving like a bat out of hell. And somebody who's slower than you is like, oh my God, they're just delaying traffic. You're the only one doing it perfectly from your perspective. Mm-hmm. And the truth is it's, they're saying the same thing about you. And so it's the same thing within all this, but what we're attracting or where we're at is in our control. And by focusing our inner dialogue to the positive belief system, this, like you said, things aren't going to fall apart. I think they're falling together. I think things are falling together. They're evolving. Things do change. Now, it doesn't necessarily match what everybody wants to happen or they think that wants to happen. It's like I saw this big debate the other day, and it's amazing how things tend to fall into a perceived conservative or liberal view.
Right.
But a lot of schools are doing away with cursive handwriting. You know,
well,
they're not teaching it anymore.
I have to admit, I'm amazed that they're teaching handwriting at all.
Right. Well, and so there, and again, it's almost been more of the, when I say this, more of the, at least from my observation, the traditional conservatives are like, you must teach old school cursive handwriting. You must. And then the newer people are like, why? I mean, everybody types. Nobody even writes things by hand anymore. I mean, it's just sort of, you know, so you hear both sides, right? And so, you know, again, within that spectrum of that, we're losing all of our values because we don't know cursive. How will people read the you know, our Constitution if they can't? I mean, that's one of the things I read, and I go, they probably can find a printed copy online pretty easily, or, you know, you can probably get several of those. But again, they're looking at it. So, you know, from my perspective is, I agree. Why are we wasting a moment? I would much rather spend what would be spent on teaching somebody cursive handwriting. Cursive handwriting is, like, to me, like Latin. Why do you need it in today's world? But a lot of people think that's one of the things they believe things are falling apart. They need to stick to the fundamentals. Well, that's not the fundamental. That's just a way of communicating. When everybody used to write by hand, that is what you had to do. I mean, I've always had horrible handwriting. Over the years, because I type everything or I have somebody that types it for me, my handwriting has gotten even worse. I mean, it's terrible. So my cursive is unreadable. My printing is just a step behind that. So I type everything. So I don't, but that's not a negative in my life. So you can find anything to freak out about. And,
you can. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned conservatives who are into. Oh yeah, you mentioned conservatives who are, you know, freaked out about. Well, you got to learn how to do handwriting because you got to know how to read the Constitution, and I think that's a great example of perspective, because when I pay attention to how conservatives or liberals, for that matter, really anybody, how they understand what their perspective is on the Constitution, I often wonder if I'm reading the same document, because they come up with interpretations and I look at it like, what the bleep are you talking about? Here's what it says and here's what you're saying it says. And like, what? Well, perspective is everything. And I had a real personal experience with that yesterday. After the podcast that I did with Wendy, I commented to her that, you know, we have the theme music at the beginning and the end of the podcast, right? And I commented to her, I was amazed how it depended on what my mood was at the end of a podcast. If my mood was really high, the music sounds energized and fast and moving along. And if my mood is like, okay, not bad, just, you know, not just like in the lower end of the positive range, it seems soft and gentle. It's the same music, but I see it differently just because of my perspective at that moment in time. I mean, that really caught my attention. Like the same music, but I experience it differently depending on how I feel.
I have the perfect example in my life for that. And you would never have guessed at the beginning of the show today, I'm going to use the movie The Blues Brothers as an example.
All right.
But it's the perfect analogy. When the Blues Brothers, I was very young when the Blues Brothers first came out, and I went on a date with sort of an unintentional date. I was sort of, you know, I asked this young lady to go to see the movie with me, and I was actually I was interested in, it's a long story, but I didn't want to go to the movies with this young lady. Okay. So we go see the Blues Brothers, and I sat there and I'm like, I didn't want to be there with her. She not her. She just was somebody that I didn't realize. She was very negative at the time, but I didn't understand why that was I didn't like to be around her. Mm-hmm. And so I watched the movie and said, everybody asked me how the movie was. It was okay. That was sort of stupid. That was my perspective. It was like, yeah, Well, probably a few weeks later, several buddies were like, we're going out. We're going to see another movie. Well, that was sold out. So they said, let's go see the Blues Brothers. I go, God, it's not that good. I saw it already. They were all going to go whether I went or not. So I said, okay, I'll just go in and see it again. One of the greatest movies of all time. I've watched it. I have a copy of it. It's a great movie. I remember lines from the movie to this day. I quote them often in a joking way with my friends. It's just such a great movie. But again, the first time I viewed the movie, it was with a negative mindset. It was a perspective that was who I run, just like you're talking about the music. At the end of the show, and I only do this once a week, so I usually, so all the time, every time I hear it, I'm like, wow, that's good. That's boom, boom, that's a great signal. It's sort of we have all this positive that we're talking about. We feel great. All of a sudden that music comes on. It's like a great climax to 99% of the shows we do. So it again, how you're listening to that is all determined everything that goes on in your life. If you think about great times in your life and what you associate with that, it's because how you were feeling that made you view things a certain way. We live in amazing times, Walt. I mean, it's just amazing. And I find more and more people are coming to the law of attraction concepts, the metaphysical belief systems, and it doesn't mean you can't be religious and believe in God. It's a separate thing. But this is exciting. I mean, I posted a video earlier today. You mentioned before the show, and I don't know why this fascinated me because it's on the edge of the metaphysics that I study. But there's a video. It's on my Facebook page if anybody wants to see it. They captured light with a camera that can view things at 1 trillion frames per second.
Yeah, unbelievable, just amazing.
And they can slow it down so much that there's a Coca-Cola bottle that they turn a beam of light on and turn it off, and you can literally see the light. It slows light down where you can see it travel.
Mm.
I just find that just fascinating, and people go, "Why?" Well, it just is. I mean,
it's the first time I've ever seen a photon. I mean, you can actually see a photon passing through the bottle, and the thing that's really brilliantly lit is the photon. The bottle actually looks dark by comparison.
Yeah.
But as the photon passes through the bottle, you can see how it's lighting the bottle. And you can kind of visualize how, when it happens at full speed, what we're really seeing is the whole bottle illuminated by these photons passing through it. Well, shoot.
Right.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful image to me. And just like you're talking about, I'm fascinated by that. I find that amazing. The other people are going to go, whatever. Well, that's why I think we live in amazing times. I mean, what I like is not necessarily what you like.
Exactly.
And when people are viewing the world as everything's falling apart, their world is falling apart, not because of any outside forces. It's because they believe it's falling apart.
Yes.
Or if you believe it's an amazing time to be alive, it's an amazing time to be alive.
It is. Both ways are true. Yeah, that's how it is that the same music can appear to be fast or slow depending on what mood I'm in when I hear it. And it does seem, I mean, we're talking like a little bit. When it feels really, really good, it feels like it's flying, like super fast.
Yes.
And when I'm in the lower mood, it feels like it's just laconically moving along. I mean, it really feels that different. It's amazing. Just amazing.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's really good. I want to remind everybody, we have the free ebook available this week. LOA Today's page, my Facebook page, any of our co-hosts' Facebook page should have it on it if we're doing the right thing. And next Tuesday, we're going to be having the book. It is available now, but we would prefer you wait to Tuesday to buy it. It'll help with our analytics and all that as we move forward. We'll be talking more about the book, and something tells me there'll be another book down the road too.
I think there's going to be. Actually, there is a page at the end for people to submit their own law of attraction stories. And I have a feeling we're going to get a lot of email off of that one. So yeah, there is going to be another book. You can almost bet on it. Joel, this is great. 2 Joels in 1 week. I love that. So thank you so much for sitting in for Cindy yesterday and for doing the show today.
Walt, I appreciate it. I look forward to that really fast music right now.
There we go. Okay, and we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.